The Collect, Epistle and Gospel for today, the third Sunday after the Epiphany. Almighty and everlasting God, mercifully look upon our infirmities, and in all our dangers and necessities stretch forth your right hand to help and defend us. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. The Epistle to the Romans, Chapter 12. Be of the same mind toward one another. Do not set your mind on high things, but associate with the humble. Do not be wise in your own conceit. Repay no one evil for evil, but respect what is honourable in the sight of all men. If it is possible, as much as it is up to you, be at peace with all men. Do not seek revenge yourselves, my beloved, but give place to God's wrath. For it is written, Vengeance belongs to me. I will repay, says the Lord. Therefore, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he be thirsty, give him a drinker, and in doing so, you will heap coals of fire on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. The Gospel according to St. Matthew chapter 8. When he came down from the mountain, great multitudes followed him. Behold, a leper came to him and worshipped him, saying, Lord, if you want to, you can make me clean. Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him, saying, I want to. Be made clean. And immediately his leprosy was cleansed. Jesus said to him, See that you tell nobody, but go, show yourself to the priest and offer the gift that Moses commanded, as witness to them. When he came into Capernaum, a centurion came to him, asking, Lord, my servant lies in a house paralyzed, grievously tormented. Jesus said to him, I will come and heal him. But the centurion answered, Lord, I am not worthy for you to come under my roof. Just say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I also am a man under authority, having under myself soldiers. I say to this one, Go, and he goes, and another, Come, and he comes. I tell my servant to do this, and he does it. When Jesus heard it, he marvelled, and turned to those who followed, saying, Certainly I tell you, I have not found so great a faith, not even in Israel. I tell you, many will come from the east and the west, and will sit down with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the children of the kingdom will be thrown out into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Jesus said to the centurion, Go on your way. Let it be done for you as you have believed. His servant was healed that very hour. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. In the words of the Gospel we have just heard, when he was entering into Capernaum, there came to him a centurion, beseeching him, saying, Lord, my servant lies at home, sick of the palsy, and grievously tormented. The leper came to him when he came down from the mountain, but this centurion when he entered into Capernaum. Wherefore then did neither of them go up to the mountain? Not out of remissness, for indeed the faith of them was fervent in both, but in order not to interrupt his teaching. But having come to him, he said, My servant lies at home, sick of the palsy, grievously tormented. Now some say that By way of excuse, he mentioned also the cause why he had not brought him. For neither was it possible, he said, paralyzed as he was and tormented, and at his last gasp, to lift and convey him. For he was already at the point of dying. St. Luke adds, he was even ready to die. This is a sign of his having great faith, even much greater than theirs, the one who was let down through the roof, because he knew for certain that even a mere command was enough for the raising up of the patient, such that he thought it unnecessary to actually physically bring him. So what then did Jesus do? He had in no case done before, but here he does. For on every occasion he was used to follow the wishes of his supplicants. Here he rather springs toward it and offers not only to heal, but also to come to the house. And thus he does that we might learn the virtue of the centurion, because if he had not made this offer, but had said, "Go your way, and let your servant be healed," we would have learnt none of these things. But this he did, perhaps in the opposite way to the case of the Phoenician woman. For here, when not summoned to the house of his own accord, he said, "He will come, that you might learn the centurion's faith and humility." But in the case of the Phoenician woman, he refused the grant and drives her, persevering therein, to great perplexity and determination. For being a wise physician and full of resource, Jesus knows how to bring about the contrary things in our lives. And here, by his freely offered coming, so there by his peremptory putting off and denial, he unfolded the woman's faith. And so likewise he does in Abraham's case, saying, "I will by no means hide from Abraham my servant, to make thee know that man's kindly affection and his care for Sodom." And in the instance of Lot, that they were sent to refuse to enter into his house, to make thee know the greatness of the righteous man's hospitality. What then said the centurion? "I am not worthy that you should come unto my roof." Let us listen then, as many as are to receive Christ. For it is possible to receive him even now. Let us listen and indeed copy, receiving him with great zeal. For indeed, when you receive a poor man who is hungry and naked, you have received and clothed him. But say in a word only, and my servant shall be healed. See how this centurion, just as the same as with the leper, had the right opinion touching him. For neither did this one say entreat, nor did he say pray and beseech, but command only. And then, from fear lest out of modesty he refused, he said, "For I also am a man under authority, having under me soldiers, and I say to this one, go, and he goes, and the other, come, and he comes, and to my servant, do this, and he does it." And what of that? If the centurion suspect it to be so, for the question is whether Christ affirmed and ratified as much. You spoke well and sensibly. Let us then look at this very thing, and we shall find out what happened in the case of the leper, the same happening here likewise. For even as the leper said, "If you would," and not from the leper only are we positive about his authority, but also from the voice of Christ, in that so far from putting an end to the suspicion, he even confirmed it more by adding what was perhaps unnecessary to say in the phrase, "I will." Be clean, in order to establish the man's thoughts. So here, too, it is right to see whether any such thing occurred. In fact, we can see the very same thing taking place. For when the centurion had spoken these words, and testified his so great prerogative, so far from blaming, he even approved it. and then did somewhat more than approve. For neither did the evangelist say that he praised the saying only, but declaring a certain earnestness in his praise, he marvelled. And neither did he simply marvel, but in the presence of all the whole of the people, set him up as an example to the rest, that they should look and copy. See how each one of them bore witness to the authority of Christ, and is marvelled at. The multitudes were astonished at his doctrine, because he taught of one having authority. And so far from blaming them, he took both of them with him when he came down, and by his words of cleansing to the leper confirmed their judgment. Again, listen to the words of the leper. If you will, you can make me clean. And so far from rebuking, on the contrary, he cleansed him by such treatment. Again, the centurion said, speak the word only, and my servant shall be healed. And marvelling at him, Jesus said, I have not found so great faith, not even in Israel. Now, to convince us of the opposite also, let us turn and consider Martha. For having said nothing of this sort, but to the contrary, whatever you will ask of God, he will give you. So far from being praised, even though an acquaintance and dear to him, and one of them that had shown great zeal toward him, she was rather rebuked and corrected by him, as not having spoken well, in that he said to her, I did not say to you that if you would believe, you would see the glory of God, blaming her as though she did not yet even believe. And again, because she had said, whatever you will ask of God, he will give you, to lead her away from such a summary, and to teach her that he needs not to receive from another, but is himself the fountain of all good things. He said, I am the resurrection and the life. That is to say, I do not wait to receive power, but work of my own. Wherefore, at the centurion he both marvels and prefers him to all the people, honouring him with the gift of the kingdom, and provokes the crowd to the same zeal. And to show you that for this end he also spoke, for the instruction of the rest to believe in the same manner. Listen to the exact words of the evangelist. Jesus, he said, turned around and said to those who followed him, I have not found such great faith, not even in Israel. It follows, then, that to have such high imagination concerning Jesus, especially this of faith, procures the kingdom and his other blessings. For neither did his praise reach in words only, but he both restored the sick man wholly, in recompense of his faith, weaving for him a glorious crown and promising great gifts, saying, Many shall come from east and west, and shall sit down in the bosom of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But the children of the kingdom shall be cast out. So, as he had shown so many miracles, Jesus proceeded to talk to them with less reservation. Then, in order that no one might suppose his words to come from flattery, but that all might be aware that such was the mind of the centurion, he said, Go on your way. As you have believed, let it be done for you. And straightway the work followed, bearing witness to his character. For the question is, whether each of them has been set before us with the zealousness of the man, and his having had the right opinion concerning Christ. But it is likely that after sending his friends, he himself also came and said these things. And if Luke did not speak of the one, no more did Matthew of the other. And this is not the part of men disagreeing amongst themselves, but rather of those that are filling up on the things omitted by one another. See by another thing how also Luke proclaimed his faith, saying that his servant was ready to die. Nevertheless, not even this cast him to despondency, neither did it cause him to give up. But even so, he trusted even further that he should prevail. And if Matthew affirmed Christ to have said, I have not found such faith, no, not even in Israel, and therefore to show clearly that he was not an Israelite, while Luke said, he built our synagogue, neither is this a contradiction, for it was possible for one, even though not a Jew, to build the synagogue and to love the people. But do not say, I beg you, merely inquire what was said by him, but add thereto his rank also, and then you will see the man's excellency. Because in truth great is the pride of many who are in places of command, and not even in affliction do they take the lower ground. He, for example, who is set down in John, is for dragging him into his house. Calm down, for my child is ready to die. But not so this man. Rather, he is superior both to him and to those who had been let down on the bed through the roof. For he seeks not the bodily presence, neither did he bring the sick man to the physician, a thing which implied no mean imagination concerning him, but rather a suspicion of his divine dignity. But he said, speak the word only. And at the beginning he said, not even speak the word, but only describe his affliction, for neither did he of great humility expect that Christ would straightway agree and inquire for his house. Therefore when he heard him say, I will come and heal him, then and not before, he said, just speak the word, Lord. Nor yet did the suffering confound him, but still under calamity he reasons coolly, not looking so much to the health of his servant, as to the avoidance of appearing to do anything irreverent. And yet it was not he that pressed it, but Christ that offered it. Nevertheless, even so he feared, lest by chance he should be thought to be going beyond what he deserved himself, and to be drawing upon himself something above his station in life. Do you see the wisdom of this man? Contrast this with the folly of the Jews in saying, he was worthy for whom he should do the favour. For when they should have taken refuge in the love of Jesus toward the man, they rather allege the man's worthiness, and do not know so much as on what ground to allege it. But not so he. But he affirmed himself even in the utmost degree unworthy, not only of the benefit, but also of merely receiving the Lord in his house. Therefore, when he said, my servant lies sick, he did not say speak, for fear that he should unworthily obtain the gift, but he merely made known the affliction. And when he saw Christ zealous on his part, not even then did he spring forward, but he still continues to keep his own proper measure. Perhaps one might say, why did Christ not honour him in return? We might say that he did not make him return in honour, and that exceedingly, first by bringing out his mind the thing which appeared by his not coming to the house, and in second place by introducing him to his kingdom, and preferring him to the whole of the Jewish nation. For because he made himself out unworthy even to receive Christ into his house, he made himself worthy of a kingdom and of attaining the good things which Abraham enjoyed. But how, one might ask, was the leper not commended, who showed things greater than these? For he did not so much say, speak the word, but what was far more, just be willing, which is what the prophet said concerning the Father. He has done whatever he pleased. But he also was commended, for when he said, offer the gift that Moses commanded for a testimony to them, he means nothing else but, you shall be an accuser of them in that you did believe. And besides, it was not the same for one that was a Jew to believe, and one who was a Gentile. For the fact that the centurion was not a Jew is evident, both from his firstly being a centurion, and from what it is said, I have not found so great a faith, no, not even in Israel. It was a very great thing for a man who was out of the list of the Jewish people to admit so great a thought. For he did so no less imagine to himself, as it seems to me, the armies in heaven, all the diseases and death and everything else, were so subject to him as his soldiers were to himself. And so he would say likewise, for I also am a man set under authority. That is, you are God and I am man. I am under authority, but you are not. If therefore, being a man and under authority, I can do so much, how much more can you, both as God and not under authority? Thus, with the strongest expression, he desires to convince the Lord that he says this as one giving not a similar example, but one far exceeding. For if I, he would say, being equal in honour to them who I command, and under authority, yet by reasoning of this trifling superiority of my rank can do so much, and no one contradict me. That is done, though the injunctions be various. For I say to this man, go, and he goes, and to another, come, and he comes. How much more will you yourself be able? Some might actually read the place as this. For if I, having been a man, having soldiers under authority, under me, but, I beg you, how he signified that Christ is able to overcome even death as a slave, and to command it as master. For in saying come and he comes, and go and he goes, he expresses, if you should command his end not to come upon him, it will not come. Notice just how believing he was. For that which afterwards would be shown to all, here is one who already had faith in evidence. That Jesus had the power over both life and death, and leadeth down to the gates of hell, and bringeth back up again. Nor was he speaking only of soldiers, but also of slaves, which related to a more absolute obedience. Nevertheless, even though he had such great faith, he still considered himself unworthy. Christ, however, suggested that he was worthy to have him enter his house, and did much greater things, marvelling at him, proclaiming him, and giving him more than he had ever dreamt of asking. For he came indeed seeking for his servant health of body, but went away in receipt of a kingdom. See how the saying had already been fulfilled. Seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and all these things shall be added to you. For because he evinced great faith and lowliness of mind, he both gave him heaven and added unto him health. And not by this alone did he honour him, but also by signifying upon whose casting out he will be brought in. For now, from this time on, he proceeds to make known to all that salvation is by faith and not by works of the law. And this is why not only to Jews but to Gentiles also, the gift so given it will be offered, and to the latter rather than to the former. For think not, said he, by any means that it has so come to pass in regard of this man alone. Indeed, it shall be so in regard to the whole world. And this he said, prophesying of the Gentiles and suggesting to them hope. For in fact there would have been some following him from Galilee of the Gentiles. And he said this on the one hand, not letting the Gentiles despair, and on the other putting down the pride of the Jews. But that his saying be not affronting to the hearers, nor affording them any barrier, he neither brings forward prominently what he had to say of the Gentiles, but on occasion taken from the centurion. And he does not use nakedly the term Gentiles, not saying many of the Gentiles, but many from east and west, which was the language of one pointing out the Gentiles, but was not as offensive to the hearers, because his meaning was slightly obscured. Neither in this way only did he soften the apparent novelty of his doctrine, but also by speaking of Abraham's bosom instead of the kingdom. For neither was that term familiar to them, and moreover the introduction of Abraham would have been a sharper sting to them. Wherefore John also spoke nothing at first concerning hell. But what was most apt to grieve them, he said, think not to say, we are children of Abraham. He is providing another point also, not to seem in any sense opposed to the ancient ideas. For he that admires the patriarchs and speaks of their bosom as an inheritance of blessing, does much more than sufficiently remove also this suspicion. So let no man therefore presume that the threat is one only, for both the punishment of the one and the joy of the other is double. Of the one not only that they fall away, but they fall away from their own. Of the other not only that they attain, but they attain what they had no expectation of. And there is also a third, that the one received what pertained to the other, and he calls them children of the kingdom, those for whom the kingdom had been prepared, which also more than all was going to gall them, in that having pointed to them as being in their bosom by his offer and promise, he then drives them out. Then, because what he had said was mere affirmation, he confirms it by the miracle, as indeed he shows the miracles in their turn by the subsequent accomplishment of the prediction. He, accordingly, who disbelieves the health which the servant then received, let him from the prophecy, which has from this day come to pass, believe that the other also. For so that prophecy again, even before the event, was made manifest to all by the sign which then took place. To this end, you see, having first uttered the prediction, and not before he raised up the sick of the palsy, that he might make the future believable by the present, and the less by the greater. Since for virtuous men to enjoy his good things, and for the contrary sought to undergo his penalties, were nothing improbable, but a reasonable event, and according to the tenor of laws, but to brace the feeble, to raise up the dead, being something beyond nature. Nevertheless, to this great and marvellous work the centurion too contributed no little thing, which we see. For Christ also declared, Go, and as you have believed, so it be done for you. See how the health of the servant proclaimed aloud both Christ's power and the faith of the centurion, and became a pledge of the future. Or it was rather a proclamation of Christ's power. For not only did he heal the servant's body, but the soul also of the centurion he did bring over unto the faith by miracle. Do not look at this alone, that the one believed and the other was healed, but marvel how quickly also. For this too the evangelist goes on to declare, saying, his servant was healed in that selfsame hour. Even of the leper also, he said, he was straightway cleaned. For not by healing, but by doing so both in a wonderful manner, and in a moment of time he displayed his power. Neither in this way only did he profit us by example, but also by his constant practice in the way he performed his miracles, opening incidentally his discourses about his kingdom, and drawing all men toward it. For those even whom he threatened to cast out, he threatened not in order to cast them out, but in order that through the fear of being cast out, he might draw them in. And if not even hereby they were profited, theirs is the whole blame, as also all of whom are like of the same mind. For not only all Jews may see this as taking place, but also amongst those who have believed. For Judas too was a child of the kingdom, and it was said of him with the disciples, you will sit on 12 thrones, and yet he would go on to become a child of hell. Whereas the Ethiopian, barbarian as he may well have been, and of them from the east and west, shall enjoy the crowns with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This indeed takes place among us today. For many, he said, that our first shall be last, and the last first. This he said, that neither the one may grow languid as unable to return, nor the others be confident as standing fast. This John also declared from the beginning, when he said, God is able from these stones to raise up children of Abraham. So, since it was so to come to pass, it is proclaimed long before, that no one may be confused at the strangeness of this event. But he indeed speaks of it as a possible thing, for he was first. Christ, on the other hand, as what will surely be, providing the proof of it from his own works. Let us then not be overly confident who stand, but let us say to ourselves, let the one who thinks he stands take heed lest he fall. Neither let us who are fallen despair, but say to ourselves, he that falls, can he not arise? For many even who have mounted to the very summit of heaven, and have shown forth all austerity, and have made their abode in the deserts, nor saw any woman so much as in a dream, having become a little remiss, have been tripped, and have come into the very gulf of wickedness. While others again from this place have gone up to heaven, and from the stage and orchestra have passed over into the discipline of the angels, and so displayed great virtue as to drive away devils and to work many other such miracles. And of these examples both the scriptures are full, and our lives also full. Even whoremongers and effeminate stop the mouths of the Manichaeans, who say that wickedness is immovable, enrolling themselves on the devil's side, weakening the hands of those who would wish to be in earnest, and trying to overturn our lives. For those who promote such thoughts not only injure men for the future, but here also turn things upside down. Because when you regard virtue from amongst those that are living in wickedness, so long as he accounts his returns that way, and change for the better, surely such a thing is possible. For if now, when both laws exist and penalties are threatened, and there is a common opinion to recall the ordinary, and hell is looked for, a kingdom promised and the wrong things reproached and the good praised. Hardly would any choose the labours that are to be undergone for virtue's sake. Should you take away all these things, what is there then to hinder ruin and corruption? Let us then understand the devil's craft, and that as well as the lawgivers of the Gentiles as the oracles of God, and the reasonings of nature, and the common opinion of all men, even barbarians, Scythians and Thracians, generally all, are directly opposed both to these and to such as strive to exact the doctrines of fate. Let us therefore be sober, beloved brothers and sisters, and bid farewell to all those, and let us travel the narrow path, being both confident and also in fear. In fear because of the precipice to the left and the precipice to the right, but confident because we hold the hand of Jesus Christ our guide. Let us travel on, sober and wakeful, for though but for a little while one slumber, he is swept away quickly. For we are no more perfect than was David, who by a little carelessness from time to time was hurled into the very gulf of sin. And yet he repented and rose again quickly. Look not then to his having sinned, but to his repenting and washing away his sin. For to this end he wrote the history, not that you should see him fallen, but admire him risen, to teach you, when you are fallen, how you should pick yourself up again. In the same way as physicians choose the most grievous diseases, and write of them in their books, and teach their method of cure in similar cases. If so be men have practised on the greater, may easily master the less. Even so God likewise had brought forward the greatest of sin, that they also who offend in the smaller things may find the cure easy, by means of the other. Since if those admitted of healing, much more the less. Let us then look at the manner both of the sickness and of the speedy recovery of that blessed man. What then was the matter of his sickness? He committed adultery and murder. For I shrink not from proclaiming these things with a loud voice, since if the Holy Spirit thought it no shame to record all this in history, much less ought we draw a shade over it. So I not only proclaim it, but I add another circumstance also. In fact, those who hide these things, they most of all men throw his virtue into the shade. As they that say nothing of the battle with Goliath deprive him of no small crown, so also they hurry by this history. Doesn't my saying seem a little paradoxical? But wait a moment, and then you will know the reason we have said this. For to this end I wish to magnify the sin and make my statement stronger, that I may the more abundantly provide the cure. What is it then that I add? The man's virtue, which makes the fault so much greater. For all things are not judged alike in all men, for mighty men, it is said, shall be mightily tormented. He that knew the Lord's will and did not do it, shall be beaten with many sticks. So that more knowledge is a ground of more punishment. And for this same reason the priest, if he commit the same sin as those under government, shall not have the same to endure, but something infinitely more grievous. Perhaps then, seeing the charge against them amplified, you tremble and fear, and marvel at me as though I were going down a precipice. But I am so confident on that righteous man's behalf, that I will proceed even further. For the more I aggravate the charge, so much the more shall I be able to show the praise of David. What more can there be than this, you might ask? Abundantly more. For as in the case of Cain, what was done was not only a murder, but worse than even many murders. For it was not a stranger, but a brother he killed, and a brother who had not done but suffered wrong. Not after many murderers, but having first originated the horrid crime. So too, that which was perpetrated was not murder only. For it was no ordinary man that did it, but a prophet. And he slayed the one that had not done anything wrong, but the one who had suffered wrong. For indeed he had been mortally wronged by the forcing away of his wife. Nevertheless, after that he added the murder too. Consider then that I have not spared that righteous one. How without the least reserve, I have mentioned his offences. But yet, so confident am I concerning his defence, that after so great a charge sheet as this, I might fully stop the mouths of the accusers. Indeed, we could say he committed murder and adultery. But I say not only this, but have also proved the murder to be twofold. First, from the one who suffered the wrong, and then from the quality of the person who offended. For it is not the same thing. For one to whom the Spirit was gifted, and on whom so many great benefits had been conferred, and one who had been admitted to such freedom of speech, and such a time of life, to go and venture on crimes of such a sort, as without all these to commit this self-same thing. Nevertheless, even in this respect is that most illustrious man worthy of admiration, that when he had fallen into this very pit of wickedness, he did not sink nor despair, nor cast himself down on receiving of the devil so fatal a wound. But quickly, or rather immediately, and with great force, he gave a blow more fatal than he had received. And the same thing occurred, as if in war and in battle some barbarian had struck his spear into the heart of a chieftain, or shot an arrow into his liver, and had added to the former wound a second more fatal than that, and that he had received these grievous blows when fallen, and wallowing in much blood all about, were first to rise up quickly, and then hurl a spear at the one who had wounded him, and show him dead on the ground within a moment. Even so in this case also, the greater the wound, so much more admirably does the man imply the soul of him that was wounded to be, and had the power after this grievous wound to rise up and stand in the front of the battle and bear down on the one that had wounded him. How great a thing this is, they best know, whosoever are fallen into grievous sins. For it is not so much a proof of a generous and vigorous soul to walk upright, and to run all the way. For such a soul had the good hope going along with it, to cheer, to rouse, to nerve and render it more zealous, as after these innumerable crowns and so many trophies, victories, having undergone the utmost loss, to be able to resume the same course, and that which I say may be made plain, I will endeavour to bring before you another example, not at all inferior to the first. For imagine, I beg you, a sailor, when he had sailed the seas without number, and sailed over the whole oceans, after many storms and rocks and waves, to sink, having with him a great cargo in the very mouth of the harbour, and hardly within his naked body to escape this grievous shipwreck. How would he naturally feel toward the sea, seamanship, and such work? Will such a one then ever choose, unless he be of a noble soul, to see a beach or a vessel or a harbour, I believe not, but he will lie hiding his face, seeking night all through the day and shrinking from all things. He will choose rather to live by begging than to put his hand back to the same labour. But it was not the case with this man. Though he had undergone such a horrific shipwreck, after all those innumerable troubles and toils, he did not stay with his face covered, but launched a new vessel, and, spreading his sails and taking the rudder in hand, applied himself to the same labour, making his wealth more abundant again. Now if to stand is so admirable, rather than to lie down for ever and ever after one has fallen, to rise up again and to do such deeds, what crowns would not this deserve? And yet, surely, there are many great things to drive him to despair. First, the greatness of his sins. Secondly, not at the beginning of his life, when our hopes are perhaps more abundant, but near the end, these things fell upon him. For neither did the merchant who has just gone out of the harbour and been wrecked grieve equally with him, who after many traffickings strikes upon that rock. Thirdly, that when he had already obtained great wealth, this would happen. Indeed, for that time he had stored up no small merchandise. For instance, the deeds of his early youth, when he was a shepherd, those about Goliath, when he set up the glorious trophy, those pertaining to his self-command respecting Saul. Since he showed forth even the evangelical long-suffering, in that he got his enemy 10,000 times into his hands, and continually spared his life, and chose rather to be an outcast from his country and from liberty, and from life itself, rather than to slay the one who was unjustly continually plotting against him. Likewise, after his coming to the kingdom, there were other noble deeds of his to no small amount. Besides the things that we have discussed, his credit also amongst the many and his fall from glory so bright would cause no ordinary perplexity. For the purple did by no means so much adorn him as the stain of his sin disgrace him. And you know, of course, what a great thing it is for evil deeds to be exposed, and how great a soul is required in such a one, not to despond after the censure of the multitude, and when he has so many witnesses of his own offences. None the less, all those darts that noble person drew out of his soul, and so shone forth after this, so wiped out the stain, became so pure, that his offspring even after his death had their sins mitigated by him. And that which was said of Abraham, we find God saying the same of this man also, or rather much more of the latter. For with respect to the patriarch it is said, I remembered my covenant with Abraham. But here he said not the covenant, but I will defend this city for my servant David's sake. And besides, on account of his favour toward him, he suffered not Solomon to fall from the kingdom, great as the sin was which he was going to commit. And so great was the glory of the man that Peter, so many years later, in exhorting the Jews, spoke, Let me freely speak of you of the patriarch David, that he is both dead and buried. Christ, too, discoursing with the Jews, signified him after his sin to have had the Spirit granted to such a degree that he was counted worthy to prophesy again concerning the Godhead. And thereby stopping their mouths, he said, How then doth David in spirit call him Lord, saying, The Lord said to my Lord, Sit at my right hand. And as much as with Moses, so it fell out also with David. For as Miriam, even against Moses' will, was punished by God for insolence to her brother, because he greatly loved the holy man, even so this man, injuriously treated by his son, God swiftly avenged, and that against his will. These things are then sufficient. Indeed, rather before all others they are sufficient to indicate man's excellency. For when God pronounces his judgment, we should inquire no further. But if you want to be acquainted with his self-command, you may, by pursuing his history after his sin, perceive his confidence toward God, his benevolence, his growth in virtue, and his strictness right until his very last breath. So then, having these examples, let us be sober, and let us strive not to despair, and if at any time we fall, not to remain prostrate. For not to cast you into slothfulness did I speak of the sins of David, but to work in you more fear. For if that righteous man, through a little remission, received such wounds, what have we to suffer, who every day are so negligent? Do not therefore look at his fall, and be remiss as he may have been, but wasn't. But consider the great things he went on to do after this, what great mournings and what great repentance he showed, adding his nights to his days, pouring forth fountains of tears, washing his couch with tears, withal clothing himself in sackcloth. Now if he needed so great a conversion, when will it be possible for us to be saved, feeling insensible after so many sins? For he that has done many good deeds would easily even by this throw a shade over his sin. But he that is unarmed, whenever he may receive a dart, receives a mortal wound. In order then that this may not be so, let us arm ourselves with good works. And if any offence befalls us, let us wash it away, that we may be counted worthy, having lived the present life to the glory of God, to endure the life to come, unto which we may all attain by the grace and love toward man of our Lord Jesus Christ, to whom be glory and might forever and ever. Amen.